So, Lone Rider here, and I wanted to talk about some of the advantages of single-speed mountain bikes and single-speed bikes generally. And in that category, I will include some aspects of fixed gears, although they're different than single speeds in as much as they don't freewheel. But some of the the pros here and the cons are both going to be related. So the first thing is that they're simple. There's a variety of benefits to having a simple bike, a bike that's simple mechanically. One is that there's less to purchase if you're buying it new. Or if you're building it up, there's less work to do in terms of assembling it. Three, you have less compatibility issues. A lot of modern gearing systems, there's a question of what interacts with what, and can you use that shifter with that derailleur, with that cog set. With this, it's not an issue. All you have is a chain and a front gear and a back gear. And sometimes, if you're using a frame that wasn't designed as a single speed like this, a chain tensioner. That's it. Right? With a single speed anyway. With a fixed gear, you're not even going to have a chain tensioner because you can't really use them. If you apply force backpedaling or whatever, it'll damage it and it won't end well. I actually tried using a chain tensioner on a fixed gear years and years ago. It's a bad idea. That's all I'll say about that. And this, like I said, is true for both fixed gears and single speeds. The simplicity factor. They're easier to put together. They're easier to maintain. They're usually, all things being equal, cheaper to buy. I mean, you could have a really high quality single speed. You could have a really, basic geared mountain bike or geared road bike. And obviously, in that case, the question is frame materials, etc. But yes, all things being equal, the single speed mountain bike or single speed bike generally isn't going to cost more than an equivalent quality geared bike, and usually will cost somewhat less, even if it's only a little less. Sometimes the financial savings in terms of purchasing a new thing as a whole bike is overstated. Generally speaking, removing the gears and the shifter and the derailleur from the bike doesn't drop the cost a huge amount. Well, it used to be that the frame and the wheel set were the most expensive parts of the bike. The drivetrains, especially a lot of the modern drivetrains, are fast eclipsing the cost of wheel sets as the second most expensive part. Especially if you have these fancy 1x or 11 speed or any of that stuff. Your drivetrain can, in some cases, approach the cost of the frame. And certainly runs the risk of eclipsing the cost of the wheel set as the second most expensive part, if you will. However, a good quality frame is not cheap when it's new. And so simply taking the gears off doesn't necessarily make the bike that much cheaper to manufacture. Now, yes, if the manufacturer and the retailer don't have to spec the parts on it, and then, okay, so you're not, they're not paying for that. But, yeah, there should be a cost savings. The question is it going to be $20 less or is it going to be $100 less? It varies, right? And generally speaking, the higher end frame you buy, if you're buying like a high end single speed or a high end track bike, it could cost as much as a geared bike. Usually not as much as one of equivalent quality though, because again, you're not getting all those parts. However, how much will the savings be? There's usually a savings. Is it going to be dramatic? I don't know. But it's there. And certainly if you're putting it together from parts that you have to buy, if you just get the frame, either a new frame, if you're buying a frame only, or from a custom maker, or if you have an old frame lying around, you want to convert, or a frame you got used specifically to build up a single speed. If somehow you just end up with the frame, building it up yourself and acquiring the parts to do so is going to be cheaper if it's a single speed, because then the cost of the drivetrain is going to be factored in. If you're buying a whole bike retail, maybe they won't subtract the cost as much because they'll just factor that into the markup. Although generally speaking, the markup on bikes and bike stuff is usually very small. But the point is that if you have to buy all the parts yourself, you definitely see a tremendous savings there. This bike is an example. This bike I actually put together myself, and it literally cost me nothing until I decided to get this aftermarket chainring, and then I had to pay for the chainring. But everything else, literally everything else I had lying around the house. The frame and fork are stock. Everything else was replaced. The seat post was replaced. The skewer was replaced. The chain tensioner was put on there. The wheels were replaced. Oh wait, no, the cranks and the bottom bracket I think are original, but everything else on the bike is new, or I should say new to the bike. Most of the stuff I didn't actually buy; I just had lying around. But that's the great thing with making a single speed or having a single speed. Like I said, it's easier to maintain. There's less to buy if you're buying it new as a whole bike, and if you're buying the parts to put it together, you have to buy some parts. You have to buy less parts, and even if you buy a really high-end chainring that costs you, I don't know, $70 or something, this didn't cost anywhere near that. But assuming you did, you went and you bought a real high-end chainring and it was like $70 or $80. That's $70 or $80 for the chainring. Imagine how much a whole geared drivetrain would cost, especially if it was high quality. Way more than $70 or $80, I'll tell you that much. So there's a cost savings there, and then there's just a convenience there. It's easier to, you could get this built up and on the road in a very short period of time, or on the trail as the case may be, compared to the amount of effort you'd have to spend to put together a geared bike. It just takes longer. I've done it. It's more work, which means more time. Now, if you're having somebody else do the work for you, like let's say you're from the neighborhood bike shop, that more time equals more money. If you're doing it yourself, maybe you figure, well, okay, I enjoy doing this and whatever. I'm not like putting a cash value on my minutes here. But if it does take you less time, then you can get out and be enjoying the bike quicker, right? So there's a benefit to that. There's another benefit, which is that it teaches you to use the range of the gear more. Most people, when they get to the point where they're either grinding or spinning, i.e. they're pedaling really fast or really slow, they're not in an efficient part of that gear. So they shift to the next one, or the previous one, depending. And if what you're trying to do is ride in the most efficient and effective manner possible, keep up with a fast group ride, win a race, whatever, train really hard, that's certainly, the way to do it. Grinding and spinning are not usually the most efficient way to ride, but there are going to be times when you might have to grind or spin. So knowing how to use the extreme ends of each gear, being comfortable with that if necessary, is something that this teaches you, right? And with fixed gears, we can also add in that you learn not to coast, because you can't coast on a fixed gear. So, less wasted energy there. Also, you get to not only get used to pedaling at a higher or lower range in the gear that you normally stay in, but you normally just stay in that middle part. There's this aspect, which is your body gets used to being on the bike and moving on the bike and controlling the bike when you're pedaling really fast or really slow, when you're spinning or grinding. So I don't know about you. One of the problems I found is that if I'm pedaling really, really, really fast, there's a wobble that spreads from my spinning legs and hips all the way up to the rest of my body. And you lose stability. You're not as able to maintain control. Ideally, a rider from here up, should be rock solid. And it should just be your legs that are moving. The rest of you should be you should be moving maybe with the bumps, or with, your elbows shouldn't be locked. But the point is you shouldn't be shaking all over the place and losing control. And this is especially useful in any kind of situation that's has variables in it that might have a safety concern. So if you're riding over rough terrain, whether it's mountain biking in the woods on a pretty hairy trail, or whether it's over bad pavement with potholes or in traffic or whatever, the point is that you want to have the most control you can. And getting used to, especially it must be said, spinning out while going fast on a bike like this, or trying to pedal as fast as you can before you hit the point where you spin out, so that you can get up to a desired speed. It teaches you how to control not only the bike and how to pedal and how to spin like crazy, and get at least somewhat used to that. It also teaches you how to control yourself on the bike, so that you don't start wobbling. So there's a whole list of things that are good about this. I think when I talked about single speeds before, I pointed out that you also get a little more exercise out of each ride, because you have to do, the machine's doing less, so you have to do more. That's certainly helpful for those of us who might need a little more exercise. And then of course, mentally it's like, there's just you could take a geared bike and just leave it in gear, right? Leave it in one gear. But there's something, knowing that you only have the one gear and that it's, the rest is on you, is something just so satisfying when you do get to the top of that climb, or when you do negotiate that, log or whatever. And we'll add it to that, especially with respect to mountain biking, or I would argue even commuting. There's an advantage. I said there's less to buy, there's less parts, there's less to maintain, there's less to break as well. If you're mountain biking, one of the common things that happens is like a stick or something will flip up and hit your derailleur. Or if you take a spill, you risk bending your derailleur. In this case, there is a chain tensioner mounted on the derailleur hanger, but it has like no moving parts. It's just a chain tensioner. It's like a thing with a wheel. That's it. Unlike a derailleur, which if it's out of alignment, your gears will skip. I mean, yes, if this is really out of alignment, it might be bad for you, but it's a hell of a lot harder to get out of alignment, right? And if you're riding a dedicated single-speed frame where there is no chain tensioner, or if you have the so-called magic gear setup where your gear ratio takes up the length of the chainstay without needing a chain tensioner, or if you have an eccentric hub, or there's a variety of things you can do. The point is there's less parts sticking off the bike that can get damaged in a spill. Same thing goes for commuting. If you're riding year-round, whether for errands or to ride to work or whatever, there's a reason that when I was commuting to work back in like 07 or 08 or whatever, I rode a fixed gear and I rode a single speed primarily. Every once in a while, if it was a nice day and I knew I was going to take the long way home, I took my road bike, or I took a bike with gears. But 9 times out of 10, I took a single speed or I took a fixed gear even. And one of the reasons was that is there was just less to go wrong, right? The last thing you want to do is be late for work because your derailleur got mucked up. Another thing to think about is there is a weight savings. If you have less parts on the bike, it is going to be usually a little lighter. Now that may be negligible, but especially for those of us who aren't that thin. But it's something to think about. Another thing is just the fun factor. Everybody talks about the fitness aspects or the sportive aspects of keeping up with other riders. There's also the fun factor. I mean, people don't, whether it's biking, hiking, fishing, archery, historical fencing, ping pong, whatever it is you do, if it's not fun and it doesn't put a smile on your face, why do it? And this is one of those things where, single speeds really are, they're genuinely fun to ride. Whether it's the satisfaction of knowing that you had to put a little more effort in to get up that hill, or whether it's just the fact that mechanically it's essentially a giant BMX bike, and therefore, maybe harkens back to a simpler time, to your youth, whatever. For some reason, these are just really fun to ride. I mean, any bike is fun to ride, I'm going to be honest, except maybe a unicycle. But when I mountain bike, I have several mountain bikes. I have a dual suspension mountain bike, I have 2 geared mountain bikes, and I have a vintage mountain bike. I usually take my single speed, either this one or the Airborne. Usually I take the Airborne, that's the one that's set up a little bit. This one has a middling gear, I can use it on the street too, I just don't go very fast. The other one is a more dedicated off-road gear for hilly off-road terrain. But what's interesting is they're both, except for the fact that this has rim brakes and the other one has disc brakes, they're both set up essentially the same, except for a slight change in the gearing. And it's interesting that I do have 2 single-speed bikes. They're both silver, they're both sloping top tube frames. They're both very similar, except that one's got bigger tires and disc brakes and a slightly better fork. And yeah, I mean, If you can't tell, I like single speeds. And that said, there is a downside to it. You know, I mean, if you're trying to ride with a group of people, like I wouldn't take a single speed in a long, fast road ride. It just wouldn't make sense. Maybe there's some people who can do it. In my youth, there was this one guy who used to ride with the crowd at the bike shop who rode a fixed gear, and he would not only keep up with a lot of us on road bikes, he would leave us in the dust sometimes. But not everybody's like that. Most people, it's not going to be as fast or as efficient. But speed and efficiency on everything. Again, there's the fun factor, there's the simplicity factor. And you know, when you're, especially in terms of mountain bikes, how fast are you really going to be going off-road anyway, over rocks and roots? I don't know about you, I don't go that fast. So that's, you know, it's that. An underappreciated use for this though is as an around town bike, especially like this one if it has a middling gear. You know, and especially in the winter. It's cold right now, and you know there's no snow on the ground, but there was earlier in the year. And yeah, if I was going to take a bike out in that kind of weather, it would be a single speed. You know, just because there's less to get fouled, there's less to get, you know, snow and salt in, and you know, you're not going to be riding as much in the winter probably as during fair weather, but it, like I said, it allows you to get a little more out of each ride, both in terms of fun, both in terms of exercise, both in terms of just, you know, putting a smile on your face. And isn't that why we do it? So, some good things about single speeds, a couple downsides, and yeah, you know, I would encourage you to give one a try. A lot of people thought it was sort of a trend, both with fixed gears and single speed mountain bikes. The truth is, yeah, there were a lot of hangers on. There were a lot of people who just thought they were cool, or you know, they went out and they saw what was that movie with Kevin Bacon, Quicksilver. The truth is that you know, most of the people I know who ride single speed also have geared bikes. I do, so does pretty much everybody I know who has a single speed or even a fixed gear. But for certain applications, they almost exclusively use the single speed. And that's what's so funny. When I go mountain biking, 9 times out of 10, I take the single speed. Doesn't mean I want to get rid of my other mountain bikes. They're awesome and I do occasionally use them. But 9 times out of 10, when I'm going mountain biking or I'm doing anything else, the first thing I think of is, should I take my single speed? And almost invariably the answer is yes. Again, I wouldn't take it on a long road ride with a bunch of other fast people, but for just riding around, 9 times out of 10 is the go-to. And I think there's a reason for that. So, there's been a lot of talk about, oh, there was a single speed trend that burned out. Not for the people who really got it, because for us it was never a trend. Lone Rider out.